Vasudevaya. Om Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narom Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Vidya Nashtivraye Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtike. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, today we are starting new chapter, chapter 83. Draupadi meets the queens of Krishna. Text number 1 onwards. Shri Shukvacha Tatha Anugriya Bhagavan Gopinam Saguru Gati Yudhishthir Matha Prichat Sarvascha Suhrido Avyayam. Shukdev Goswami said, thus Lord Krishna, the spiritual master of the gopis and the very purpose of their life, showed them his mercy. He then met with Yudhishthir and all his other relatives and inquired from them about their welfare. So as we know, Krishna is in Kurukshetra with all the queens of Dwarka, with his parents, the Vrajvasis came, Pandavas came, Kurus came, they all met over there. And Krishna met, in the previous chapter we studied how he met the gopis, and now he met Yudhishthira Maharaj and other relatives. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out an additional meaning. While Lord Krishna is a goal for all the sadhus in general, for the gopis specifically, he is that goal which is Guru, predominant, in the sense of completely eclipsing the significance of all other possible goals. So he's a Guru. Guru also means predominant. So he is the principal goal for the gopis. Tam evam lokanathena pariprishta susatkritaha pratyuchur hrishta manasas tat padeksha hatan hasaha. Feeling greatly honored, Lord King Yudhishthira and the others, freed of all sinful reactions by seeing the feet of the Lord of the universe, gladly answered his inquiries. Kuto shivam tvacharanam bujasavam mahan manasto mukhani sritam kvachit pibanti ye karna putaralam prabho deham bhritam dehkrid smritichidam. Lord Krishna's relatives said, "O Master, how can misfortune arise for those who have been even once freely drunk the nectar coming from the lotus feet? This intoxicating liquor pours into the drinking cups of the ears, having flowed from the minds of great devotees through their mouths. It destroys the embodied soul's forgetfulness of the creator of their bodily existence." He tvatma dhama vidhutatma kritatrayavastam ananda samplavam akhanda makunt bodham kalopasrishta nigamavan atta yoga maya kritim paramhansa gatim natasma. The radiance of your personal form dispels the threefold effects of material consciousness, and by your grace, we become immersed in total happiness. You are unlimited by virtue of your unrestricted awareness. By your Yogmaya potency, you have assumed this human form for protecting the Vedas, which had been threatened by time. We bow down to you, the final destination of perfect saints. So simply by the effulgent light emanating from the beautiful form of Krishna, one's intelligence is purified of all material contamination. And thus the soul's various entanglements in the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance are dispelled. How then, the Lord's relatives imply, can we ever suffer misfortune? We always immerse in absolute happiness. This is the answer to his inquiry about their welfare. Shri Rishiruvacha iti uttam shloka shikha manim janeshva abhishtu vats Swandakauravistriyaha sametya govinda katha mitho agrinams triloka gita shrinu varnayami te. The great sage Shukdev Goswami said, as Yudhishthira and the others were thus praising Lord Krishna, the crest jewel of all sublimely glorified personalities, the women of the Andak and Kaurav clans met with one another and began discussing topics about Govinda that is sung throughout the three worlds. Please listen as I relate these to you. Shri Draupadi Uvacha, He Vaidarbhya Achyuta Bhadre, He Jambavati Koshale, He Satyabhame Kalindi, Shavya Rohini Lakshmana, He Krishna Patnya Etanno, Brute, Wo Bhagwan Swayam, Upiyeme Yatha Lokam, Anukurvan Samayaya. Sri Draupadi said, O whether be Bhadra, Jamvati, or Koshala, Satyabhama, and Kalindi, O Shabya, Rohini, Lakshmana, and other wives of Lord Krishna, please tell me how the Supreme Lord Achyuta, imitating the ways of this world, by his mystic power came to marry each of you. The Rohini addressed here by Draupadi is not Lord Balram's mother, but another Rohini, the foremost of 16,000 princesses Lord Krishna rescued from the prison of Bhaumasura. Draupadi turns to her as a representative of all 16,000, as a virtual equal to Shri Krishna's 8 chief queens. So she wants to know how you all came to know Krishna, met him, and how you all married him. So first Shri Rukmani said, Shri Rukmani Vacha, Chadyaya Marpaitum Udyata Karmu Keshu, Rajasva Jaya Bhattashekharati Kangri Renu, Ninyam Mrigendra Eva Bhagam Ajaviyutha, Tachri Niketa Charano Astu Mamarchanaya. Sri Rukmini said, when all the kings held their bows at the ready to assure that I would be presented to Shishupal, he who puts the dust of his feet on the heads of invincible warriors, took me from their midst as a lion forcibly takes his prey from the midst of goats and sheep. May I always be allowed to worship those feet of Lord Krishna, the abode of Goddess Shri. Lord Krishna's pastime of kidnapping Rukmini is narrated in chapter 52 through 54, 10th canto of Bhagavatam. Then the next queen, Satyabhama, said, Yo me sanabhi vadatapta hridatatena liptabhi shapam apama marshtum upajahara jitvaksha rajam ath ratma madasatena bhita prita dishat mam prabhave api dattam. Sri Satyabhama said, my father, his heart tormented by his brother's death, accused Krishna of killing him. To remove the stain on his reputation, the Lord defeated the king of the bears and took back the Shimantak jewel, which he then returned to my father. So we know the story of Satrajit. Fearing the consequences of his offense, my father offered me to the Lord, even though I had already been promised to others. So this is described how King Satrajit had already compromised himself by promising his daughter's hand, first to Akrura, then to again to a number of other suitors. But after the return of Shimantak jewel, he felt impelled by his shame to offer her to Lord Krishna instead. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the word Prabhave unto the Lord answers any doubt as to the propriety of offering Krishna a bride who had already been promised to others. It is perfectly proper to offer him everything one owns and improper to withhold anything from him. But Satyabhama is eternal queen of Krishna, so there was no way she was going to be married to somebody else. Shri Jamvati Vacha, Pragyaya Dehe Kridamam Nijanath Devam Sita Patim Trin Vahanyam Unnamya Yudhyat Gyatva Parikshit Upahar Darhanam Mam Pado Pragriya Manina Ham Amushya Dasi. Shri Jamvati said, unaware that Lord Krishna was none other than his own master and worshipable deity, the husband of goddess Sita, my father fought with him for 27 days. So that was Jamvan. When my father finally came to his senses and recognized the Lord, he took hold of his feet and presented him with both me and the Shimantak jewel as a tokens of his reverence. I am simply the Lord's maid servant. So this one theme that runs in among all the queens of Krishna. They all say, I am just the Lord's maid servant, and somehow or other he has been engaging me in his service. This is a mood of reverence and humble mood they all have towards Krishna. Shri Kalindi Vach, Tat Tapascharantim Agyaya, Swapada Sparsha Nashaya, Sakhyo Petya Grihitapanim, Yo Aham Tad Grih Marjani. Shri Kalindi said, the Lord knew I was performing severe austerities and penances with the hope of one day touching his lotus feet. So he came to me in the company of his friend Arjun, actually, and took my hand in marriage. Now I'm engaged as a sweeper in his palace. This is the mood of all the queens. Wonderful mood. Shri Mitra Vindo Vacha, Yo Mam Swayamvar Upetya Vijitya Bhupa, Nenne Shoyut Gam, Ivatma Balim Dvipari, Bhratrinscha Meya Pakuruta, Swapuram Shriyokas, Tasyastu Me Anubha Mandre Vane Janatvam. Shri Mitravinda said, at my Swayamvar ceremony, he came forward, defeated all the kings present, including my brothers who dared insult him, and took me away just as a lion removes his prey from amidst a pack of dogs. Thus Lord Krishna, the shelter of the goddess of fortune, brought me to his capital city. May I be allowed to serve him by washing his feet life after life. See? Shri Satyavacha, Saptokshano Ati Balla Virya Satikshna Shringan, Pitra Kritan Shitipavir Parikshanaya, Tan Vir Durmad Anastarasa Nigreha, Kridan Babandha Yatha Shishvo Ajato Kana, Yaitam Vir Shulkam, Dasi Bhishtur Turanganim, Pati Nirjitya Rajanya, Ninne Tadasya Mastume. Sri Satya said, my father arranged for 7 extremely powerful and vigorous bulls with deadly sharp horns to test the prowess of the kings who desired my hand in marriage. Although these bulls destroyed the false pride of many heroes, Lord Krishna subdued them effortlessly, tying them up in the same way that children playfully tie up a goat's skids. He thus purchased me with his valor. Then he took me away with my maidservants and a full army of 4 divisions, defeating all the kings who opposed him along the road. May I be granted the privilege of serving that Lord. Shri Bhadravacha, Pita me matu leyaya, swayamahuya datvan, Krishna Krishnaya tachittam, akshohinya sakhi jana. Asya me pada sansparsho, bhave janmani janmani, karma bir brahme manaya, yena tachreya atmanaha. Shri Bhadra said, my dear Draupadi, of his own free will, my father invited his nephew Krishna, to whom I had already dedicated my heart, and offered me to him as his bride. My father presented me to the Lord with an Akshohini military guard and a retinue of my female companions. My ultimate perfection is this, to always be allowed to touch Lord Krishna's lotus feet as I wander from life to life, bound by my karma. With the word Atmana, Queen Bhadra speaks not only for herself, but for all living entities as well. The soul's perfection is devotional service to Krishna, both in this world and beyond, in liberation. Shri Lakshmano Vacha, Mamapi Rajanya Achyuta Janma Karma, Shrutva Muhur Narad Gita Masaha, Chittam Mukunde Kil Padma Hastaya, Vrita Susmrishya, Vihaya Lokapan. Shri Lakshmana said, O Queen, I repeatedly heard Narad Muni glorify the appearance and activities of Achyuta, and thus my heart also became attached to that Lord Mukunda. Indeed, even goddess Padmahasta chose him as her husband after careful consideration, rejecting the great demigods who rule various planets. Gyatva mam matim sadhi pita dohitri vatsalaha brihatsena iti khyatas tatra paya machikarat. My father Brihatsen was by nature compassionate to his daughter, and knowing how I felt, O saintly lady, he arranged to fulfill my desire. Yatha swayamvare ragi matsya parthepsaya krita ayam tu bhaira channo drishyate sajale param. Just as a fish was used as a target in your swayamvar ceremony of queen to assure that you would obtain Arjun as your husband, so a fish was also used in my ceremony. In my case, however, it was concealed on all sides, and only its reflection could be seen in a cloud of water below. So this was Lakshmana's Swayamvar ceremony. The target at Draupadi's Swayamvar had been covered only partially so that a marksman could see it if he looked straight up the pillar on which it was placed. To shoot Lakshmana's target, however, it was necessary to aim by looking up and down at the same time, an impossible feat for any mortal, if only Krishna could strike the target. Shrutva tat sarvato bhupa ayurmat pituh puram sarvastra shastra tattagya sopadhyaya sahasrasha. Hearing of this, thousands of kings expert in shooting arrows and in wielding other weapons converged from all directions on my father's city, accompanied by their military teachers. Pitra sampujita sarve yatha vedyam yatha vaya adadu sasharam chapam vedadhum parshadi madhya. My father properly honored each king according to his strength and seniority. Then those whose minds were fixed on me took up the bow and arrow and one by one tried to pierce a target in the midst of the assembly. So only the kings or princes who were extremely intent on winning the hand of the princess even tried to shoot the target. It was so difficult. They had to look up and down at the same time. How is it possible? Adaya vesrajan kechit sadyam kartumanishvaraha akoshtam jayam samutkrishya peture ekaham unahta. Some of them picked up the bow but could not string it, and so they threw it aside in frustration. Some managed to pull the bowstring towards the tip of the bow, only to have the bow spring back and knock them to the ground. Sadyam kritva pare vira magad ambashta chedipa bhimo duryodhana karano navidanstad avasthitim. A few heroes, namely Jarasan, Shishupal, Bhima, Duryodhan, Karna, and the king of Ambashta, succeeded in stringing the bow, but none of them could find the target. These kings were very strong physically, but they were not skillful enough to find the target. Even Karna. Matsya bhasam jale viksha kyatva cha tad avasthitim partho yattos asrijat banam nachinnat pasprishe param. Then Arjun looked at the reflection of the fish in the water and determined its position. When he carefully shot his arrow at it, however, he did not pierce a target, but merely grazed it. So Arjun was more expert a marksman than the other kings, but his physical strength was not adequate to the task of shooting it with perfect accuracy. And of course, Lakshmana was supposed to marry Krishna, so there was no way anybody could have hit the target. So Arjun came close. So Arjun, many times, because see the serial makers or movie makers, they have their own viewpoint and they have their own consciousness. So they always show or try to show Karna was much, much better than Arjuna, and Arjuna was just favored by Krishna, so he won everywhere. Eklavya was much better than Arjuna. Arjun was the best warrior, best archer. Karna, yes, Karna was good archer. Many times he came close to Arjun. But besides the skills of archery, Arjun was a devotee of Krishna. That was his biggest skill, or biggest um, positive point. But he was a great archer. It's not like he was just a novice archer and he was just because Krishna favored him, he won. No, not like that. Very, very powerful and great archer. राजन्येषु निवृत्तेषु भग्नमानेषु मानिषु भगवान् धनुरादाय सज्जं कृत्वा कलीलया तस्मिन् सन्धाय विशिखं मत्स्यं वीक्ष्य सकृञ्जले चित्वेषुनुपातयत्तं सूर्यचाभिजिति स्थिते. After all the arrogant kings had given up, their pride broken, the Supreme Personality of God had picked up the bow, easily strung it, and then fixed his arrow upon it. As the sun stood in the constellation Abhijit, he looked at the fish in the water only once and then pierced it with the arrow, knocking it to the ground. Each day the sun passes once through the lunar constellation Abhijit, marking the period most auspicious for victory. As pointed out by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, on this particular day, the Muhurta of Abhijit coincided with the high noon, further emphasizing Lord Krishna's greatness by making the target all the more difficult to see. But still, Krishna is Krishna. Of course, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What's so difficult for him? Divi Dundu Bhayo Ne Dur Jai Shabda Yuta Bhuvi Devash Kusuma Saran Mochur Harsha Vivalaha. Kettle drums resounded in the sky and on the earth. People shouted, Jai, Jai. Overjoyed demigods showered flowers. Tatrangava Visham Aham Kalanu Purabhyam Padbhyam Pragriya Kanakojwal Ratnamala Nudne Niviya Paridhaya Chakoshikagre Savridahas Vadana Kavri Dritsrik. Just then I walked onto the ceremonial ground, the ankle bells on my feet gently tinkling. I was wearing some garments of the finest silk tied with a belt, and I carried a brilliant necklace fashioned of gold and jewels. There was a shy smile on my face and a wreath of flowers in my hair. Srila Sridhar Swami states that Sri Lakshmana was so excited by remembering how she obtained the Supreme Lord that she forgot her natural shyness and went on to describe her own triumph. So she is speaking higher in front of Draupadi and other queens of Krishna. Unniya Vaktram Urukuntal Kundala Tvinga Gandasthalam Shashirahasa Kataksha Moksha Ragyo Niriksha Parita Shanakara Murare As Anse Anurakta Hridaya Nidhe Sumana. I lifted my face, which was encircled by my abundant locks and effulgent from the glow of my earrings, reflected from my cheeks. Smiling coolly, I glanced about. Then looking around at all the kings, I slowly placed a necklace on the shoulder of Murari, who had captured my heart. Tavan Mritanga Pataha Shank Bherya Nakada Adaya Dine Durnat Nartakyo Nandritur Gayaka Jaguhu. Just then there were loud sounds of conch shells and mridangas, pataha, bheri, and anak drums, as well as other instruments. Men and women began to dance and singers began to sing. Evam mrite bhagavati mayeshe nopa nripa yutapa nasye hire yagya seni spardhanto hrichayaturaha. The leading kings there could not tolerate my having chosen the Supreme Personality of Godhead. O Draupadi, burning with lust, they became quarrelsome. Srila Sridhar Swami comments that the contamination of lust led the kings to quarrel foolishly with the Lord even after seeing his supreme power. Of course, not the kings like Bhima and some other kings who could not could not do the task. Mam tavridaratham arapya heratna chatushchayam shargam udyamya sannadhas tasthavajo chaturbhuja. The Lord then placed me on his chariot, drawn by 4 most excellent horses. Donning his armor and raiding his bow sharang, he stood on the chariot, and there on the battleground he manifested his 4 arms. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, with 2 of his arms, Lord Krishna embraced his bride, and with the other 2, he held his bow and arrows. Darukashchodayama Kanchanopaskaram Ratham Mishitam Bhubujam Ragye Mrigana Mrigaradiva. Daruk drove the Lord's gold-trimmed chariot as the kings looked on, a queen like small animals helplessly watching a lion. Tyanva Sajjanta Rajanya Nishedadhum Patikechana Samyatta Udhrite Shvasa Gram Simha Yatha Harim. The kings pursued the Lord like village dogs chasing a lion. Some kings, raising their bows, stationed themselves on the road to stop him as he passed by. Tesharangachutta Banugha Kritu Bahya Andhri Kandhara Nipetu Pradhane Kechit Eke Santerja Dudruvahu. These warriors were deluged by arrows shot from the Lord's bow, Sharanga. Some of the kings fell on the battlefield with severed arms, legs, and necks. The rest gave up the fight and fled. Tata Purim Yadu Patirati Alankritam Ravichd Dhvaj Pat Chitra Toranam Kushasthalim Divi Bhuvi Chabi Sansutam Samavishataranim Swaketanam. The Lord of the Yadus then entered his capital city, Kushasthali, Dwarka, which is glorified in heaven and on earth. The city was elaborately decorated with flagpoles carrying banners that blocked the sun, and also with splendid archways. As Lord Krishna entered, he appeared like the sun god entering his abode. Abode of the sun is in the western mountains, where he sits each evening. Pita mein pujya amasa surit sambandhi bandhavan mahar havaso alankare shayasan parichade. My father honored his friends, family, and in-laws with priceless clothing and jewelry, and with royal beds, thrones, and other furnishings. Dasi bhi sarva sampadbhir bhate bhar rath vaj bhi ayudhani maharhani dado purnasya bhaktitaha. With devotion, he presented the perfectly complete Lord with a number of maidservants bedecked with precious ornaments. Accompanying these maidservants were guards walking on foot and other riding elephants, chariots, and horses. He also gave the Lord extremely valuable weapons. The Supreme Lord is Purna, perfect and complete in himself. He requires nothing for his satisfaction. Knowing this, a pure devotee makes offerings to the Lord only out of love, bhaktita, with no expectations of material profit. And on his part, the Lord happily accepts even a small gift of flowers, tulsi leaves, and water when it has been offered in love. So Lord is full. He doesn't need anything, but he just accepts everything when we offer it with love. Atma Ramasya Tasyema Vayam Vagriha Dasika Sarva Sanga Nivrityadha Tapsa Cha Babhuvima. Thus, by renouncing all material association and practicing austere penances, we queens have all become personal maidservants of the self-satisfied Supreme Lord. It's a common theme among all the queens. They all consider themselves as maidservants of the king, of the Supreme Lord. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Srimati Lakshmana became embarrassed when she realized that she had been talking about herself, and we spoke this verse praising her co-wives. In her humility, Lakshmana claimed that Krishna's queens, unlike ordinary wives, could not bring their husband under control, and thus they could relate to him only as servile housekeepers. In fact, however, since the Lord's queens are direct expansions of his internal pleasure potency, Ladani Shakti, they fully controlled him with their love. With their love and devotion and service mode controlled. Mahishya uchu, homam nihatya saganam yudhitena ruddha, gyatvatana chitijay jitraja kanyaha, irmuchya samsriti vimoksham anusmaranti, padambujam parinyaya ya apta kamaha. Rohini Devi, speaking for the other queens, said, after killing Bhaumasura and his followers, the Lord found us in the demon's prison and could understand that we were the daughters of the kings whom Bhauma had defeated during his conquest of the earth. The Lord set us free, and because we had been constantly meditating upon his lotus feet, the source of liberation from material entanglement, he agreed to marry us, though his every desire is already fulfilled. Rohini Devi was one of the 9 queens questioned by Draupadi, and thus it is assumed that she speaks here representing all 16,099 other queens. Srila Prabhupada confirms this in Krishna book. Navayam sadhi samrajyam swarajyam bhojyam apyuta vairajyam parameshtayam cha anantayam va hare padam kamyam aha etasya Shrimat Pad Raja Shriya Kuch Kunkum Gandhadayam Murdana Bodum Gada Prita. O saintly lady, we do not desire dominion over the earth, sovereignty of the King of Heaven, unlimited facility for enjoyment, mystic power, the position of Lord Brahma, immortality, or even attainment of the kingdom of God. We simply desire to carry on our heads the glorious dust of Lord Krishna's feet, enriched by the fragrance of kumkum from his consort bosom. See, this is the mood of all the queens of Dwarka. Lord Krishna's queens clearly state that they do not desire any of these powers, or even the position of Brahma, liberation, or entrance into the kingdom of God. They simply want the dust from Shri Krishna's feet, which goddess Shri herself worships. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur tells us that the goddess of fortune mentioned here is not Lakshmi, the consort of Narayan. After all, the Acharya explains Goddess Lakshmi could not attain the direct association of Krishna, even after performing extended austerities. So, Shri referred to here is the supreme goddess of fortune, which is Srimati Radharani. The transcendental goddess Srimati Radharani is the direct counterpart of Lord Shri Krishna. She is a central figure for all the goddesses of fortune. She possesses all the attractiveness to attract the all-attractive personality of Godhead. She is a primeval internal potency of the Lord. Vrajastriyo yadavanchanti pulindyastrana virudha gavascharyato gopa padasparsha mahatmana. Now this is very special among these 16,100 queens. Other 8 queens did not desire this, but these queens desired that, and Krishna fulfilled the desire. Very, very important. You remember this when we come to the other pastime, then I'll remind you what we studied here. We desire the same contact with the Supreme Lord's feet that the young women of Braja, the cowherd boys, and even the aborigine Pulinda women desire. The touch of the dust he leaves on the plants and grass as he tends his cows. So he is tending his cows only in Braj, not outside. So these queens desired that they go to Braj. They don't want to be in Dwarka. The gopis considered the sophisticated women of Dwarka the most serious threat to their hold on Shri Krishna, confessing their anxiety to Uddhav. But Rukmini and her 7 chief co-wives considered themselves so fortunate in the relationship with Krishna as he appeared in Dwarka that they did not especially desire to see him as he is in Vrindavan. But the 16,000 lesser queens, well, lesser in the sense they were married afterwards, and they're not as great as Rukmini, Satyabhama, and others. After hearing Uddhav describe Sri Radha's super excellent qualities, became attracted to touch the dust that falls from Krishna's feet onto the grass and plants of Vrindavan. And also, they must have met gopis and Srimati Radharani herself in Kurukshetra. So they must have desired, they developed that desire for Krishna's love as they have, as the gopis have for Krishna. So thus ends the purport to 10th canto, 83rd chapter, Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Draupadi Meets the Queens of Krishna. So we still have time, so we can start the next chapter, although this next chapter is little long. So until you have some questions or comments, we can start the next chapter. Okay, chapter 84, the sages' teachings at Kurukshetra. Text 1. Shri Shukvacha, Shrutva Pritha Subal Putrit, Yagya Seni Madhavyat, Shakti Papante Uta Swagopya, Krishna Kilatmani Haro Pranayanubandham, Sarva Visismar Ulam Ashru, Kala Kulakshaya. Shukdev Goswami said, Pritha, Gandhari, Draupadi, Subhadra, the wives of other kings, and the Lord's cowherd girlfriends were all amazed to hear of the Queen's deep love for Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and soul of all beings, and their eyes filled with tears. Draupadi is a chief hearer in this assembly of exalted women, since, as explained by Srila Sridhar Swami, she had asked a question. The Lord Krishna's queens answered by relating their respective stories. Since Gandhari and the other ladies named here were not even mentioned in the previous chapter as having been present, Acharya Sridhar concludes that they must have heard the queen's narrations only second-handedly. Indeed, Draupadi would never have spoken so freely in the presence of Pritha and Gandhari, her elders, or before the gopis, whose attitude towards the queens of Dwarka was not particularly sympathetic. Even the gopis joined in shedding tears, it was more because of their being reminded of Sri Krishna's pastimes than because of any loving affinity between them and the queens. But regardless, the eyes were filled with tears. Iti sambhashamanas stribhin strishu nribhir nrishu ayayor munyas tatra Krishna Rama didirikshya dvapayano naradash chavano devalo asita Vishwamitra Shatanando Bharadvajo at Gautamaha Rama Sashishyo Bhagwan Vasishto Galvo Bhrigu Pulaste Kashapo Atrishcha Markandeyo Brihaspati Dvit Strit Sitascha Katascha Brahmaputra Statangiraha Agastaya Yagavalkyascha Vamadeva Dayo Pare. As the women thus talked among themselves and the men among themselves, a number of great sages arrived there, all of them eager to see Lord Krishna and Lord Balram. They included Dvapayan, means Vedvyasi, Narad, Chevan, Deva, Lasit, Vishwamitra, Shatananda, Bharadvaj, and Gautam. Lord Parshuram and his disciples, Vashishta, Galu, Bhrigu, Pulaste, and Kashyap, Atri, Markandeya, Brihaspati, Dvit, Trit, Ekat, and the 4 Kumaras, and Angira, Agastya, Yagyavalkya, and Vamadeva. So basically all the sages, great sages from all over the universe, They came to take darshan of Krishna. And just think of this, if all the gopis are there, all the queens of Krishna are there, and if Krishna was just some lusty teenage boy running after gopis, why would all the sages, all these great sages from all over the universe would even bother to come to see some lusty teenager boy? No way. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's why they came to see him, to take his darshan. How he deals with this particular set of devotees, that's up to him. But these are sages, and rest everybody are his devotees. Queens, gopis, parents, everybody. Yudhishthira, Pandavas, other kings, they are his devotees. And he has special relationships with all of them. Tan drishtva sahasothaya pragasena nripadaya Pandava Krishna Ramocha pranamur vishwa vanditaham. As soon as they saw the sages approaching, the kings and other gentlemen who had been seated immediately stood up, including the Pandav brothers and Krishna and Balram. They all then bowed down to the sages, who are honored throughout the universe. Tanan Narchur yatha sarve saharamo achyuto archayat swagatasan padyarthya malya dhupa anulepane. Lord Krishna, Lord Balram, and the other kings and leaders properly worship the sages by offering them words of greeting, sitting places, water for washing their feet, drinking water, flower garlands, incense, and sandalwood paste. So this is how they greeted all the sages. Uvacha sukham asinam bhagwan dharma guptano sadasastasya mahato yat vacho anushanvataha. After the sages were comfortably seated, the Supreme Lord Krishna, whose transcendental body protects religious principles, addressed them in the midst of that great assembly. Everyone listened silently with rapt attention. Shri Bhagwan Vacha Aho Vayam Janma Bhrito Labdham Karsanena Tatphalam Devanam Api Dushprapam Udyogeshwar Darshanam. The Supreme Lord said, now our lives are indeed successful, for we have obtained life's ultimate goal, the audience of great yoga masters, which even demigods only rarely obtain. Despite the great privileges the demigods enjoy as administrators of the universe, they rarely see such sages as Narada and Vyasadeva. How much rarer then must it be for earthly kings and mere cowherds to see them? Here Lord Krishna, identifying himself with all the kings and others who had assembled at Samant Panchak, speaks on their behalf. Kim svalpa tapasam nirnam archayam devachakshusham darshana sparshan prashna prahapadarchanadikam. How is it that people who are not very austere and who recognize God only in his deity form in the temple can now see you, touch you, inquire from you, bow down to you, worship your feet, and serve you in other ways? Na hyam mayani hatirthani na deva mritchilamaya te punanti aru kalena darshana deva sadhva. Mere bodies of water are not the real sacred places of pilgrimage, nor are mere images of earth and stone the true worshipable deities. These purify one after a long time, but saintly sages purify one immediately upon being seen. Because then one develops a desire to be like them, and one gets purified by the words emanating from the lotus mouth. Because the personality of Godhead is absolute, the Supreme Spirit, any representation of him, whether manifested in stone, paint, sound, or any other authorized medium, is non-different from his original form in the topmost spiritual planet, Golok Vrindavan. But ordinary demigods are not absolute, being infinitesimal spirit souls and thus representations of the demigods are not identical with him. On the other hand, great Vaishnava saints like Vyasadeva, Narad, and the four Kumaras are always absorbed in Krishna consciousness, and thus they are veritable moving tirthas, places of pilgrimage. Even a moment's association with them, especially by hearing their glorification of the Lord, can deliver one from all material entanglement. So, this delivery or deliverance of one from all material entanglement doesn't happen just by seeing them, but by seeing them, one develops a desire to engage in devotional service more seriously. And then this deliverance from material entanglement happens. Nagnira Suryo Nacha Chandra Taraka Navhur Jalam Kham Shwasano Atvangamana Upasita Bheda Krito Haranti Agham Vipaschito Gananti Muhurta Sevaya. Neither the demigods controlling fire, the sun, the moon, and the stars, nor those in charge of earth, water, fire, air, speech, and mind actually remove the sins of the worshippers, who continue to see in terms of dualities. But wise sages destroy one's sins when respectfully served for even a few moments. And also, they have some powers. By mercy of Krishna, they can bestow devotional service upon anybody. Association with advanced sages, either directly or by hearing their instructions, is recommended in this verse for one who wishes to advance beyond the lowest stages of devotion to life. A neophyte devotee may be free from the more obvious sins of violence against innocent creatures and against his own body and mind, but until he becomes very advanced on the devotional path, he must always contend with the subtler contamination of false pride, disrespect towards respectable Vaishnavas, and lack of compassion for suffering creatures. So the best remedy for these symptoms is to hear from and honor pure Vaishnavas and to assist them in working to deliver the fallen conditioned souls. And next shloka is very, very important, especially for us when we go for yatras in different places. Dham, Tirtha or Dham. Yasyatma buddhi kunape tridhatuke Swadhi kalatradeshu bhomi jati yatirtha buddhi salile makarhichij jannesha abhigeshu saeva gokhara. One who identifies himself as the inert body composed of mucus, bile, and air, who assumes his wife and family are permanently by his own, who thinks an earthen image or the land of his birth is worshipable, or who sees a place of pilgrimage as merely the water there, but who never identifies himself with, feeds a kinship with, worships, or even visits those who are wise in spiritual truth. Such a person is no better than a cow or an ass. Means he's like an animal. Even if he goes to places of pilgrimage and he only goes to take bath in, say, Yamuna or Ganga, or eat some nice kachori or whatever is the delicacies of those places, but who does not visit and see, looks after or looks for association of spiritual people in those places, he's like an animal. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the words Bhaume Ijjati, who thinks an image made of earth is worshipable, refer not to the deity form of the Lord, but to deities of demigods. And then who sees a place of pilgrimage as merely the water there, refer not to sacred rivers like Ganges or Yamuna, but to lesser rivers. But yes, bathing in Ganges or Yamuna is good, but more important is to associate with sadhus and to learn from them how we can make progress in devotional service, how we can make progress on the path of perfection of this human form of life. That is more important when we go to Dham visit. Okay, so I guess we can stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments?
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी।
Hare Krishna Mata.
प्रभु जी आप ये थोड़ा क्लियर करो कि जब धाम पे जाएंगे तो किस मूड से जाएंगे, थोड़ा सा मेरे को समझ नहीं आया।
मूड तो सेवा का होना चाहिए। सेवा का मतलब see, धाम की सेवा by taking Hari Naam over there. And here, see, कैसे कृष्ण भी इन सेजेस से बोल रहे हैं, साधु से बोल रहे हैं, आगे चल के आएगा कि आप हमें कुछ ज्ञान दीजिए. So chapter title is Sages Teachings at Kurukshetra. So going to Kurukshetra, a dham, is or a tirtha is not just to take bath in Brahm Sarovar. He wanted to make sure कि हम समझें कि धाम में जाना मतलब साधुओं से सुनना है. And there's so many sages in the dham, so many. So we have to listen. So and that place is very conducive for listening, for making resolutions that how I can make progress spiritually, how I can serve the Dhamvasis, Brajvasis, or other places like Jagannath Puri or so many places we have been to. How can I serve them? That should be the mood. Not going there as a tourist and trying to enjoy over there. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we can stop here. You all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada.